My name's Alico, and I'm going to be explaining the story of Bleeding Rainbows, a film that went viral, that has swept the internet, the nation, millions of views, thousands upon thousands of likes. I mean, I was on Oprah, right? You may say, didn't that show stop? What do you mean? No, that show's continuing. It's on CW. Um, and I was on other shows like daytime TV, and you probably saw me if there was a black guy who looked like me talking about a film. It was not, Lee Daniels. It was me. And so yeah, I decided to make this attempt of explaining my film because I feel that it was something that took like a lot out of me. It took like a year to work on this film. I started with April, well, a little bit before April of 2021, and I ended it during, I would say, towards the fall, like going towards Christmas of 2022. So it was basically a year-long production of trying to get this film made by myself, with the help of some talented voice actors I found off of Fiverr, and with the help of some people that I met during my small semester stay at the School of Art Institute of Chicago. Amazing, talented people colleagues that I worked with voicing some of my characters. And so it was a long process. I was burnt out for a long time. I am happy to say that it's finished. It's on my platform. I'm still submitting it to film festivals, so wish me luck because you know how they get. So I want to start off with I'm going to just start from the beginning. I decided to put a warning for anybody who has any issues with they might get seizures from like flashing lights. There is a moment within the film where there's flashing lights. Anybody that we sent to the hospital or anything bad to happen. So I decided to say there's like instances of flashing lights, there's jarring camera work, which there's a lot of jarring camera work, but intentionally, okay. I'm in my found footage film era. There's sensory overload, meaning there's a lot of different things going on, like back to back sensory overload with the sound design that I had, like the different sounds that I was utilizing within the film, the different things that I was utilizing within the visual elements of the film. So might make it a little bit overbearing for somebody who has issues with like sensory overload or something like that. So I just wanted to put that out there for anybody. It's not even just about getting canceled. It's because there's just certain stuff that you have to think about as a filmmaker where it's like, well, maybe I just want to accommodate certain people. You can't accommodate everyone, but I just didn't want anybody to be blindsided with the certain elements of the film. And then I also talked about that there is, themes of there is themes of death. So those are iffy topics. That is something within this film. Okay. I started the film off. I took a lot of this footage, a lot of the footage within my film, if not from my Apple tablet manually. Well, I might show how I did that. I am making tutorials on how I did the animation. I'm doing something like that now. So I might do that later on. But if I wasn't doing it from my Apple tablet, I was shooting it from my Android phone, and I just used what I had. I got my Apple tablet from Full Sail University. I was a student there for at least a year, and I did digital cinematography. So they sent me the Apple tablet, and they sent me the Mac computer, and so I did not buy that necessarily. I mean, I did technically with student loans, but that was part of the online student package that Full Sail gives to students if they are trying to do anything within film. They will give you that stuff. And so when you first see the film, a lot of the animation that you see within the beginning credits before you see like the opening title, Bleeding Rainbows, is when I was really already getting used to the animation style, because after that, when you first initially see Blue and he's sitting in the dark and he's like, oh my God, because he's recounting the events that you see when he closes his eyes and it goes black, you'll see what happened earlier that day where they got left behind. And so a lot of times, well, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with the animation, I looked at that, and you'll start to see sort of the evolution of the different mechanics within the film. The rotoscope style started to get a little bit better. The certain movement, the camera movements were starting to be utilized a little bit better. The movements of the characters were starting to be utilized better. I started to try to understand how I can use the animation to create the space or to utilize the space that I was using. And so there was a lot of different things along with the sound that as the film goes on, you'll start to see an evolution. The opening scenes of like the crazy camera work, you'll start to see like just random buildings in the night. I wanted to have that as a foreshadowing of that a lot of the demonic activity happens during the night. With these two characters, Blue and Joseph. A lot of the stuff that happens, the spirits come out and they're physically manifested themselves, and that happens right when it hits the nighttime. After the second coming, when you start to see the sun turn red and you'll see like a Google Translate, and it basically is alluding to the fact that I was saying that the devil was coming. And so a lot of the things that happen within the film are kind of happening all at once, kind of interacting with each other. My attempt was I was compressing a lot of the stuff that was happening within Revelations, a lot of the imagery that was happening within Revelations, how it was affecting humanity. I was compressing it into one singular story. And so that's probably why when you look at the film, a lot of things might not make sense. A lot of stuff may be fragmented. I did want to attempt to basically have a compressed story of what was going on within Revelations and how it was not only affecting Blue and Joseph, who are the main characters, but it was affecting their families. It was affecting the people that they love. In terms of Joseph, you see how his sister was someone who he really cares about. He doesn't really have, you can infer, a good relationship with his parents, and she doesn't have a good relationship with her parents. And as you can see, that Blue has a good relationship with his mom. At least he probably used to. You don't really know what's going on with that, but you do see a lot of connections with the families. And a lot of connections with the characters in terms of trauma, in terms of trying to maintain faith, in terms of trying to understand spirituality, trying to understand their connection with God. I wanted to show that issue or that lack of connection, not in a way to like idolize it or say take that people in religions, but I wanted to sit there and show different aspects of religious trauma, different issues with people who have mental issues, different things that is going on right now, where I see not only in Christianity, but I see a lot in other religions. Is where everybody's very self-indulgent. Everybody wants to be spiritually enlightened. Everybody wants to be everyone. Okay, let me say it like that. When I say everyone, I'm trying to say like it's not just Christians, is what I'm trying to say. But this is, even though this is a Christian based story or a story that does take biblical context and tries to, throw it within a horror film, I'm trying to say that it isn't something that is just in Christianity. It is something, the reason I came up with the concept was, yes, of course, that element within Christianity that I have seen right now with like a lot of influencers in Christianity, a lot of people who are on trying to be, I call it the fill-in messiahs for Christianity. A lot of the things that I'm talking about when I'm showing the issues with connection with God, the issues with the connection with religion, is me trying to kind of have a commentary on what happens when things go wrong and what happens to try to redeem yourself. What do you do? What does it mean to repent? Sort of tackling certain things that I've had dealt with in my own life in terms of my faith and in terms of the connection with my religion. So, one of the pivotal things that has to do with, again, what I explained with the mental issues and the religious trauma is that you'll see, and I took two scenes, one where you see Blue's mother and she's on the balcony having a 911 conversation about her husband, who you'll see a little bit before, and he is having basically a mental breakdown out on the street. And you'll see at the top, it'll say a little conversation that happens, and that's basically her having a conversation with a 911 responder about how she doesn't know where her husband is. She's trying to allude to the fact that Blue's father, who dies before Blue is born, he has mental issues. And I think I wanted to talk about the mental issue aspect as someone who has dealt with mental issues. I wanted to show that scene. I kind of try to connect the characters to show that this is that character. If not from like the characters physically explaining it to the audience, I wanted to show like with the certain features on the character. So he has like the little sideburns on his hair, that shows that that is Blue's father that you wouldn't see with any of the other characters. I try to use certain characteristics that's specific towards that character. And so when you see him and he's like shaking and she's having this conversation, it is basically me trying to show my attempt of foreshadowing of what happens with Blue's father, what happened along the way, what has happened within these characters' lives, and what causes them to try to connect with God or causes them to leave Christianity. What has taken place in people's lives that causes their unbelief, that causes them to be left behind. And this stuff again is outside of my house. And a lot of the audio I got from on YouTube, some of it is just I looked up rapture and some people had rapture testimonies, and I decided to, download some of the audio from that. I also just had some stuff where I found off of other platforms of people talking about the rapture, people talking about God's coming, people talking about their experiences with hell. Again, it's just the overemphasis or foreshadowing of what's going to happen to the characters and what they're going to experience. And so showing the disorienting, sort of cryptic nighttime, showing some black figures in the background during the night is showing the situation with Blue's mother and his father, and his issues. Is just showing the different things, the different dynamics that is going to happen within the film that you're going to see as the film goes along. So when you see Blue and he's sitting in the dark and he's looking and he's closing his eyes because he's reliving what happened earlier that day. That's the timeline. It's earlier that day. You see him, he's walking, and this is when I was just getting used to the animation style. This is when I was really testing it out, and it was intentionally like very. I wouldn't call it mushy. I think it's neat in some way, but very just constantly moving. The gate is a perfect example of me just playing around with the color scheme and playing around with the animation and the rotoscope. I paid $5 to use the rotoscope feature on the Blue Stop Motion app, and that's how I was able to draw with the frames. And you'll see, if you noticed, a little detail on the Cadillac as the camera's going by, you'll see like little things moving in the air. That's basically showing the people getting sucked up in the air and getting taken up. But I was going to attempt to put it also in the reflection on the Jeep. I just didn't because I was like, it was already so much to get this one scene. It was a lot of, drawing and drawing, a lot of animating over trees, animating over just a lot of different aspects of the footage that even if you are taking shortcuts, which I did take with this film, certain things that seem like maybe some people would say it's just like rushed over, or some things where I'm just like drawing over big portions of a scene like the sky or like certain parts of a tree or like certain parts of the ground that the character's walking on or the car. A lot of it still requires a certain tediousness because even if you are making it bigger where you're drawing over certain portions of the film, it's still you're going to have to put in the work is what I'm trying to say, because it's not without hard work to get the type of look that I'm getting, even though you don't have to do the painstakingly process of, I guess I would say, traditional rotoscope where it's like fully going over a real person, fully going over the footage, and it's fully being I guess animated over. It's fully being rotoscoped, fully being drawn over frame by frame. And usually you will have a group of people doing that. So sound effects I got from freesound.org. A lot of creators use that. A lot of artists use that for their films. If you don't know, freesound.org is like a website where you basically get to use like sounds for free and you won't get copyrighted, it won't be an issue. And so I used a lot of that to sit there and try to explain or help with the visuals of like, oh my gosh, something's going on. There's something happening above us, and people are getting taken up. And as the trumpets happen and you see all of that, you'll see one of my favorite scenes is I took my phone and then I put it up in the front yard. I try to I use a lot of natural lighting and I use a lot of the lights and darks in a scene. So basically, a lot of like, the sun hits the forest, and then you'll see like some parts of the forest have like sunlight on it, and some parts of the forest have like shade, and use that as like a blueprint for what I'm going to do and how I'm going to animate the scene. And so when I was sitting there, usually taking my phone and like animating or taking the footage, I made sure to sort of spin around because I wanted to show that circular motion of people, groups of people in a circle being around the sun, because I didn't have enough, I guess, patience to fully animate the visual of Jesus, the visual of angels, the visual of reality cracking. So I had a lot of the decisions I made within the film is to allude to what's going on and to sort of take the imagery within the revelations and try to find a way to use what I have and what I know and to sort of express that and to make it symbolic. So as I make certain scenes, we go back to the night. It's the same day. We see Blue, he's crying, and then it goes to the bathroom. And you see Joseph trying to call his sister, and she does not pick up the phone, right? Why does she not pick up the phone? Is she in trouble? Did she get picked up? What was going on with that? We don't know until the very end, where we see all of the souls of everybody be present on the lake. And I was just sort of leaving an open ending of them being in heaven. You see Joseph say, "It's all my fault. It's all my fault." Blue trying to comfort him as they both cry. They both very emotional because again, life isn't how it was before. Life isn't, normal. Things have changed. Things have very much changed. And the people that they love are gone. Certain things have happened. Things may physically be the same in terms of the presentation of the town, the presentation of the neighborhood that they're in. However, it's obvious that things are no longer the same. And I use the moments of the black screen to sort of break it up and add more time passing. Because if I were to animate the certain times in between, you probably would have been a more coherent story. However, it would have taken probably like I would estimate with the way that I animate and the way that I obsess over a story, it probably would have took like 2 more years to, if I'm really being honest, if I were like, if not 2 more years, at least another year to like fully extend the story. And so it goes to black, and then we see like we're in my backyard, and so I'm just like showing what looks like Joseph just standing, smiling, like what's going on with that, kind of cryptic, kind of weird. You'll hear like different things that I added with the backwards voice. In this scene, I'm not saying anything demonic. In particular, this scene where you start to see the smear and you start to see like Blue, he's like, what's going on? It's not only just for like the horror concept of the film, but it's also aided with me saying, wake up, wake up, wake up. But it's reversed to sort of make it even more cryptic, to sort of make it even more unsettling. That way, if you're not really disturbed by the, I guess, the animation, you are at least intrigued by the fact that, okay, what's going on? What is this about? What is he saying? What are they saying? And a lot of the stuff is hidden, not only just to make it hidden or just to make it mysterious, but because I wanted it to make it seem like it is something that maybe it doesn't need to be revealed, even though I just revealed an aspect of what I was saying in that scene. Just dealing with time, dealing with how long am I going to work on this film, and dealing with like certain ways I could make a film work, or certain ways I could create a scene without having to do so much. And because I admit I am not someone who is fully like, um, I guess, understood, and I fully understand the physicality of an animation, or better yet, of animating a character, meaning that I couldn't just do like a anime fight scene, or I couldn't just sit there and animate without having to take in the time to study the anatomy and the physicality of the character. So knowing just the limited information that I knew about animating a character, I just had the characters move and it's in the environment in limiting ways. I used a lot of the camera movements to sort of add more depth to the scene instead of it just being these robotic moving characters. I also decided to just play around with it and see what I can do to sort of make it more engaging and not make it seem like it's a byproduct of something that's lacking. And then this is where we hear the sounds of crickets. And then we see like a worm just like on the ground, like a worm's moving. Like, what's that about? I wanted to show that there was still life, that there was still hope. Like, we still had, nature was still there. Things were still somewhat in order. Even I also had during that scene, I wanted to have the sound of crickets and the sound of nighttime. So even though it's daytime, it sounds like it's nighttime. That way, when we cut to Joseph and he's outside and he's looking, and then you see Blue sort of in the background, it was showing that when you start to hear the in and out of the cricket sound going to like the regular sound
Uh, it seems like nothing is.
that I sourced from my phone, just me outside, and the sounds that I got from freesound.org of people just recording outside. So it's not a pretty sound. It's not a sound that sounds like what you would see off of like films that are supposed to represent a realism of people being outside. That doesn't really sound like how it would sound like you're outside. I like to use a lot of the raw footage, raw sound to really help add a sense of uncomfortableness. And so when you start to hear that, that was not just me just not seeing a certain detail. I was purposely having the cricket noises go in and out and glitch in and out while you're starting to see just Blue and Joseph talk, and they're just wandering around their environment. As they look, Joseph says, seems like nothing has changed. And then it's a quick scene. It's like, boom. And then he turns around. And then you'll see, wanted to just show them just exploring the neighborhood. So I just wanted to do it in a creative way, using what I know about filmmaking, using what I know in my experience of just creating creative shots. I hope everybody on that plane made it home, but I in a quick second I saw a plane. I said, "Oh, you could animate the plane going down in fire." So it quickly goes to a plane like crashing down, and that was just a quick clip that I took, and I decided to show like, yes, things may be physically normal right now, but obviously things have changed because that plane crashing down, and you start to hear it even in the background as to sort of allude to the fact that something happened on that plane. Maybe the pilot got zoomed up and it was just some of the passengers that were left onto the plane that you saw on another film that I think had Nicolas Cage in it, and it was literally about the rapture, and that was one of the things that was happening. So maybe that's where I got that idea. Seeing the river, this is literally down the street from my house, uh having this weird black thing go on it. I got that idea came from when I looked at Revelations, and it says basically the water supply becomes poisonous because not only will because the fire, I assume, goes into the water and then destroys certain things. But yeah, it just becomes poisonous because of, like, things have become more demented, things have become um more disturbing, and no longer do we have any type of peace in civilization. So my computer about to go dead. Close up, and Blue's looking across the river, the riverbank, and you might see in the background, you might see a shadow. I'm not going to say where the shadow is, but it's a shadow figure, and it's in the background, Blue looking at the river. And a lot of what happens once they go out into the neighborhood and they start to explore the neighborhood, you'll start to see a lot. If you look in the background, I placed shadows. So I placed shadows in, like, backyards. I placed shadows like in certain places, and I wanted the shadows to be hidden, but I also, not only hidden to the audience, but also hidden to the characters until they manifest themselves into full monstrosities that go and torment Blue and Joseph later on in the short film in the house, mentally, physically, and spiritually. But I wanted to slowly have them slowly manifest themselves as you see Blue and Joseph further go into the neighborhood, because I wanted to show that as the night falls, you know, what was foreshadowed in the beginning of the film, where you start to see the physical shadow people in the background as you're looking at the different, what seems to be random buildings. I wanted to show that these spirits are no longer hidden. So, a lot of the things that were once hidden before the rapture is now being revealed. And so a lot of the spirits that you're seeing in the background, just like simple little silhouettes or just little details I wanted to add, and showing that something's not quite right. So Blue's personality is very worrying. He had a worrisome childhood, very worrisome. So throughout the film, he's worrying. He's worrying. Joseph also worries, also is going through so much, but he tries to look at the positive side of things. He tries to see the certain happiness within certain things. He tries to hold on to some kind of joy to remain sane. So they both have very different types of personalities or different ways of handling things. And I guess with the character design, that's what I really was thinking about when I made Joseph and Blue. I sort of wanted to create the aspect of, okay, this is how someone looks when they're constantly negative. This is how someone looks when they're constantly being positive, and try to work with the archetypes that I kind of created for the characters. So as we see the certain things go on within the film, you'll see like the woman covered in blood. She said I didn't do it, so she probably murdered somebody. We don't know. We see a racist man. He's saying crazy things. He looks about drunk. I call him the drunk racist man. He's saying crazy stuff and then starting to shoot, and that's why they're running. Then you'll cut to another scene, and there's a woman being dragged by a black hand. Is she being dragged by a spirit? Is she being dragged by, what is she being dragged by? We don't know. We just know we're not going back there. Something's wrong in the world. But when there's no, anything there to maintain a type of order, to maintain some type of structure, people's sins come to the forefront. A lot of damaging things come to the forefront. A lot of evil, wicked things that people have done come to the forefront. And it's no longer just people that are just existing, and we have things that are hidden. Things are now out in the open. Camera, it was hard to get Blue to look right. So he might look kind of weird when the camera's turning. But it was very pivotal to have that type of scene where it does cut, and then you'll start to hear like that loud swell, that swell start to come in. Things are not good. And then we cut, and then it's just like the ambiance of the park, and now we're having a moment to try to reset again. A lot of in and out, in and out, in and out. Just trying to replicate the feeling of what you assume the characters may be feeling in the moment. And you might notice with the animation as it goes along, there's a lot of glitching, like a lot of different things, especially in later things later scenes that you may see. There's a lot of random glitching. What happened was when I went back over the footage, certain parts of the footage would like erase what I drew over. So like certain scenes, I would draw over door, or I would draw over like just like a car, like just the footage. I would draw over parts of the footage, and I go back and it would just disappear. Then on top of that, halfway through like making this film, my iPad cracked. It's cracked again. So there's that. But with it being cracked, I had to basically move over the crack, and I had to animate over the crack over each frame. So like imagine doing that for like 1,000 frames, just like going over a crack and trying to animate. But that's how the animation style came to be. It wasn't intentional to have it constantly glitch back and forth, but I'm glad that it did earlier in the film. That way it became a part of the film's concept as it went along, instead of it being like very disorienting and it's just constantly going in and out, and you're just like, why can't it consist of just one type of animation style. And so we finally go to the next scene, and you see the little rainbow light over the trees, and then you'll see Blue and Joseph, be like, I'm surprised we're back here. And then you'll realize the reason they probably said that is because literally the last scene of the film, you'll see Jasmine, Joseph, and Blue, and they're just at the park. And so I guess basically saying, and that was my attempt when I was writing the film, improvising the script as I go along, trying to work with the storyboard that I made ahead of time. I was trying to figure out what would these characters say, what would make sense in the moment, what would they say, and that would make sense for like the later scene that I was making. And so see Joseph talking, and then it turns, and then you'll see hanging feet. The hanging feet means someone hanged themselves. So this when you hear like the rope sound effect. A part of it was for shock value, like, oh my God, someone killed himself. But a part of it was also just to, again, represent back to back to back. Oh my gosh, stuff is happening, things are happening, people are losing themselves. That because I wanted to show that it's not an alluding to. Because it was important to show basically how most of the film, especially outside, is very pretty, like very saturated, very playful. The character designs are very playful, very like kid like. And so it's important to have certain scenes like this, the legs dangling from the tree, as a way to express that it is not something that is supposed to be approached in a way that is not taken seriously. It's an attempt to take the characters seriously. It's an attempt to take what the characters are going through. See in the background, like behind everything, you'll see a pair of eyes and blue hair, and that's Joseph's mom. I mean, not Joseph's mom. That's Blue's mom, obviously because of the blue hair. And she might be looking, she might not be looking. I just thought I kind of wanted to have something in the background because I wanted to show how it wasn't just them. So then you see like the strips go by, I'm showing my attempt in showing that there's again a warp of the environment, a warp of what's going on. The little upside down crosses reflect in Blue's eyes. He's running. And then you'll see the swing set again having a moment of where when we do have these jarring shots or these shots where it's a lot of movement, and it's important to have certain shots where it's just like stationary. So I'll be able to demonstrate certain elements of the film that it would be harder to do when there's a lot going on. And so I wanted the shadow we figure is basically the devil. So the devil's literally right next to them, very close to them. And so it's the devil is now manifesting himself into their world. No longer is it like, where how we have it now where yeah, you'll have demon possession is real and like other stuff like that. But a lot of times when we think of the devil, we think of like certain illnesses that come in, certain things that happen, but we don't think of actually physically seeing the devil. And so when again representing that no longer are things hidden, now it is physically in front of them. I came up with the idea of having the shadow go along the um the ground and just having it kind of slither like a snake and show like the devil is here, he's coming, and what are we going to do? And of course, Blue and Joseph, you can imagine since they got left behind, they have no faith. They probably don't really have a connection with God. And so, of course, they're running. I mean, I would run too if I was in that situation. So, the worm being on the ground, change of lighting, the worm being on the ground, and now the worm is dead. Is and then you get a closer shot of that worm. It's sort of again showing that things have changed, right? And I think what also works with this scene, for me at least, is that it goes back to just having the sound of nighttime, like the ambiance of the nighttime, because we had so much go on that we give ourselves time to breathe, and we start to again overemphasize that okay, things are bad. You see the hands of the birds, like all the birds come together, they make a hand, it stretches out, and then it covers, the sky. You'll see the shadow of the devil manifest itself in the park. And then you'll see like the worm, and the worm is laying down on the ground dead with ants crawling over it. It's sort of showing what might happen to them, what happens to others, and that life is no longer something that it was before. We no longer have life. Life is being stolen, life is being changed, life is being taken away. And so it's only adding to the horror aspect of the film. And I do wish that I didn't make it as shaky as I did, but I kind of liked, that aspect of it. And then this is like little imagery that I had. I had a little, because my family's Christian. My dad and my mom's like, they worked in churches, and my dad's like a former pastor. My mom's like a former first lady, and they still go preach when asked to, or when they feel called to go preach in other places. But we do have a lot of like Christian imagery, like in any other house, regardless of what religion, you'll have like, imagery of your religion or like the stuff that you are in. And so I saw this little angel, and I was like, oh, I could just move everything off and have like that little black angel by the reflection of the clock, and have like the clock also represent time. So there was like a lot of things where I manually put it together. It wasn't just I shot something and then I animated over it. I manually put it together for the significance of that scene. This scene, the clock scene is what I call it, was very important because again, we already established that a lot of things were happening, a lot of stuff was going on. They were going further into the world, further into the neighborhood, and a lot of things have changed even though physically the buildings still stand. It seems like nothing changed at all, but a lot of stuff is now being revealed, a lot of the evils of the world. And so when we see the clock go in and out, we see, Blue and Joseph have a conversation. We see Blue say, I can. Then we go back out, and then we'll see, like, a lot of the radiating sun. Then we'll see like the shoes hanging from the the shoes hanging from the power lines, and it's sort of making a triangle. I kind of thought about the Holy Trinity, except a worldly idea of the Holy Trinity, like, sort of a human's attempt of creating their own type of holiness, their only type, their I guess, holy symbol in the horrific situation that they're in. And so I thought about, the shoes hanging from the power lines, and that being like something of like death, people passed away, they died. And since it's happening, like this is literally one day, it's happening so fast. Again, everything is happening all at once. Everything that would really be like shown, see the reflection more and more as you go back and forth from outside to the reflections in the clock. You'll also hear the clock tick, 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 tick more louder and louder and louder. That was intentional because I wanted it to feel like time is important. The time that they have now is important. The lack of time, time ending, time not being what it was before is very important. So I wanted, as we keep going back into the clock scene, we would have the sound of the clock be more overwhelming, and you wouldn't hear what they're saying. You only know what they're saying by looking at the subtitles below, but you would not hear what they're saying like good, because you keep hearing the loud clock and the tick, tick. I can't do this. I can't. It was your idea to go outside. We were safer in. Are we? Are we what, Blue? Safer inside. And that was intentional. Just using the language of film to try to figure out what I wanted to do. I wanted to show there was a different way of communicating with God. And so when you see this woman and she's basically outside, and you'll see some of those still shots that I took, I basically just zoomed into parts of the grass, and then I basically just had the characters sit stationary the best I could and have them do the sign language. Them basically saying, what I can remember, God, please forgive me, is the basis of what I was trying to animate. And I used a certain site to look up sign language, and I just used like the letters, like the single letters instead of like the full phrase, if that makes sense. And I would have the character I would animate the character doing that and basically asking God, begging God, please have mercy on me. You see the character close their eyes, see the light start to beam on their eyes. You also see as they get yeeted up into, wherever they're going, you'll see a shadow manifest itself more and more on them as they get up, showing that the devil was so close to getting them, but God decided to have mercy on them and take them up, give them mercy, beam them up. Again, this is not how this is not what I seen on Revelations. Like, this is not what it says in Revelations. A lot of people will go through it for at least 7 years, from what I believe. They will not have, any mercy. And there will be a lot of stuff that's going to happen. But again, me being an optimist, believe it or not, I wanted to show an aspect of mercy, show an aspect of that within the film, because I thought, well, maybe there will be mercy. Maybe there will be moments where people cry out and there will be mercy. But again, I'm saying that to say, if you are someone who's looked at the Bible and looked at Revelations, again, it's taking certain things from the Bible, but it isn't specifically solely committed to the exact things that happen within Revelations. Because again, if I were to do that in the future, I would have a team of people I'm working with. I would talk to a lot of people who are in the church. I would have to do a lot of research. I would have to split it up, if not in like a series of like the first movie, the second movie, the third movie. I would have to make it into a series. It would have to be like a whole production in order to fully illustrate the different things within Revelations. So
We we are safe.
seeing something, he's sitting in the dark, and the lights beaming on his face, and he's obviously very scared. You also see, and I think it's important to explain again when I'm talking about the visions. When you see the close up of Blue, you'll see that he his eyes go white, and then he closes his eyes. That was very important to show because um it's basically him having a vision. And then when you see him glitch and you see, like, these different faces that are happening, that's basically him going into like what I call a spiritual world, you know, a world where he's basically being met with a follower of the devil, the devil woman, who then you'll see later who takes a different form. Later, she's actually there. She's no longer just in this spiritual world with him in his head. And so it's basically a physical manifestation of the devil trying to contact Blue, because they know that Blue has the gift to be connected spiritually beyond. Scared. And you just very, I wanted to show something that's very off about her from the get go. Things happen really fast, and you'll see that quickly. There's literally no time for a negotiation, as she's basically getting messages from the devil. In the background, you hear, again, that's my backwards voice thing going on. I'm basically saying certain things that I just improvised on the spot, like convince him, make sure that he's part of our team. That we're never going to leave him. Basically, that attempt, trying to trick him. Which in this scene, the devil sort of gave himself away, because nowhere in this situation where anybody really want to be persuaded to follow somebody in a out in the middle of the parking lot, seemingly when you intrude on my head and all of this crazy stuff happens. It's like all stringy, and then you'll see her mouth is very like weird. Her eyes are big, basically again revealing further who she is, what she is, and how she is being used by the devil. And not since I did deviate a lot of things that happen within Revelations, the 666 is under her eye. Now the 666 is notably on one of the parts that I can think of on the body, is on the forehead. The mark of the beast, I decided to put it under the eyes, and you'll see it again on other characters, simply because I wanted to show that, again, emphasizing she is someone who is working with the devil. And so as the black void comes and takes her over, and then you see her again, and her eyes are fully black, you'll see, basically, I guess, a POV shot of what Blue sees as he's running away, and he's being followed not only by warped versions of himself, but also by warped versions of Joseph. Again, this is just the devil playing with him mentally, like saying, "This is what you are. This is what you've always been." The devil vexing him, tormenting him, because now the devil has the power to do so, not only because they are susceptible to that behavior because they got left behind, but because, again, overemphasizing the overall theme of um, these the spiritual has now taken over. The spiritual is now taken over, and the spiritual is now causing different things to happen. It's not good spiritual. When I basically had the time to animate over the footage when it got turned into frames. And so that's how I did that. And it turned out really well in terms of just being able to have something that felt kind of dreamlike and something that really worked with the nightmare element that I was trying to go for. Originally, it was a longer it was a long take. So it was like real long. I showed it to some of the classmates back at the School of Art Institute of Chicago, where they were like, it's good, but it's a bit long. And so I changed it. And so on certain parts, you'll see a first still picture, still shot, and it's basically a close up of this house that I took. It's somebody's house in the neighborhood. And I just looked at the clouds. I liked how it looked. It kind of reminded me of the back rooms or something that you would see off of liminal space post, something that's familiar but also eerily different from what you're used to. So initially, you'll see a close up and you'll hear, like, just an average day. It sounds like the day. And basically, it's me sitting there speaking as God, not me thinking I'm God, but me sitting there, the person that's speaking is God. And of course, it's audio that's going backwards. And so it's just me being like, me being like, uh, you will not take over, or you may have this, but in the end, I'll win, which is true. And so God's basically saying, in the end, I'll win. In the end, it will all be mine. You do not have this power, And so I thought it was interesting to include that, to have this conversation between God and the devil, simply um, sort of interconnected within Blue being tormented by the devil and being in this sort of surreal dream thing, this spiritual world, because it sort of shows the elements that was already being presented of Blue basically having a connection with something beyond him, or something that's being revealed, that Blue has a connection. And so these conversations, he's hearing them, he's in these conversations, he understands these conversations, he has a seat at the table to these conversations, while he's also dealing with his own torment right now here. And so it's all simultaneously happening in his world, but really the world in general. This is sort of illustrating what is going on between these different elements. And the concept, and then with the red eyes, the red circles sort of showing that these are the eyes of the devil. You'll see little doodles that look like they're being sort of lifted up. You'll see them get lifted up and then they start to snap, showing that this is what's going to happen to you. This is what's about to happen to you. And then you'll see the demon woman, and she says, maybe maybe then you'll learn your lesson. And so, saying that maybe if we physically taunt you, maybe if you physically get tormented and we play with you a little bit more, you'll learn your lesson and you'll learn that you can't escape and that we're basically going to make you a part of the family. We're going to have you submit to us, to submit to the true God, right? Because that's just what the devil will do. And you will not actually find peace. This is the future for you. So then you'll see Blue's eyes finally open. He's no longer there. And then you'll also see like the red around his eyes. Again, this is not showing that you know Blue is demonic. This is just showing what he's seen and sort of, I guess, another representation of what happens when you are fully connected to something beyond you, sort of how it could bleed onto you and how that's, I guess, another way I was trying to show that. And so the next scene, which is my favorite just because of how neat it is, because usually my work is not neat, this is something I took at my local park. And so I was just, again, a lot of sky shots, a lot of shots of like different things in nature. I wanted to show one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. And this is like the seven asteroids basically that come to the earth, seven times, they come down, the flames come down, and people are, the world is being struck with fire, right? And so you'll see, like, the area, and you'll start to see, like, these things come down. Again, all of these different things that are happening in Revelations are happening back to back to back. As you see the characters get tormented, they're getting tormented because, again, I'm sort of emphasizing that the world is changed. And so during the night, you'll see Blue and he's looking out and outside of his house. Again, we just saw this, but in a different way in Blue's vision. He's looking out, and then we get to something that's even more confusing. We go back to Blue's mother. And so before we go to her, before we pan quickly to her, we see what looks like, maybe a different version of her. And it's like stringy hair and it's like lifeless eyes. And then she said,
Please stop.
please stop. And then we'll see this thing come behind her with teeth. Now, the reason I added the teeth, again, when creating a story, just going section by section and just improvising as you go along, I justified the teeth being there because I wanted to have something that showed basically a monster manifesting itself. Like all the characters that are just supposed to be regular people are not, they don't have teeth. Like they don't need teeth. So something that's saying this is unfamiliar, this is demonic, this is not the norm, this is perverted. And so the teeth being seen is just something that shows like a manifestation of something or that is not normal. So that whole scene was also me showing um her disconnecting from God. So a lot of those physical representations of her was basically her being tormented by her lack of connection to God. Already have an establishing character, or a character that's about to be established even more later on in the film. And you'll see her being overcome by blackness. And she's basically saying,
Why? Why would I worship a monster like you?
she's not talking about the devil. We're not talking about the devil. You would think she's talking about the devil, or it could be double meaning to it. But she's talking about God. She views God as a monster. She's not happy of the sight that she's given. She's not happy of the gift she's given. She sees it as a burden. She doesn't see it as something that will help her get to any type of fulfilling life, something that destroyed her life. You can infer maybe destroyed her life with her son. And so um that blackness overcoming her and her eyes turning red is showing a physical representation of her resentment towards God. It's like, okay, so this is after the argument, right? This is after things went down. And they were sitting alone in their separate rooms, and then Blue had his vision, and so now everything's coming back. We're coming back to the real world. And so Joseph, he's like, okay. He goes out, he's like, I just wanna, talk, I'm sorry. Then, Blue's like, shh, like, nigga, shh, just like, hush, hush up, He's like, what? What's the tea? What's the problem? And so basically they have an argument, and, he's, well, not an argument, but he's just like, be quiet. And he's basically telling him, I hear something. So we look out, you might see again, I love the little shadows I had in the background. You might see like a little shadow go across briefly, you might. And then you see it's like, Joseph's like, I don't see anything, which is very dumb, very. And so then you look and it's like, what is that? And that is a, because if you look closely, it has of Joseph in a skin tone of blue. And so it's all mixed up, and this thing has a long neck, it has a weird body, and it's crawling towards Blue and Joseph. And so now basically no longer is it just in Blue's head, it's just a connection between Blue. This is now physically manifested itself to torment them, to cause issues. And now the only threat was not the people. Suddenly we cut, they're in the house. Suddenly they made it in the house, okay? So Joseph's at the door, because again, that thing's outside. So they're not thinking about something being inside. They're worried about something coming inside, but it's already too late. Hear it. This is where you have to really utilize sound. The classic moment in a horror film where things go black and you're in the movie theater and you hear stuff in the background. And so you see certain things. You see a Blue and Joseph attached to each other to make one big face, sort of showing their fear. So this footage is that inclusion of red. Of course, red is bad. The inclusion of orange to show like the colors of hell. And so the orange and red in the background is to I guess basically show where the asteroids are. Again, to show that the evil is near them, the destruction is near them. That is being used within the horror elements that you see. This woman that Blue is seeing is a corrupted version of his mother, right? So then it's kind of like the devil is saying, well, this is what your mother became. Like this is her now, and this is what you're gonna have to deal with. You don't get a family. That's basically what the devil is saying. And so now every time he turns around, he keeps being reminded of what the devil is showing him. Like this is the woman. This is who she is. This is what you're going to turn into. Didn't like about going back to this scene is when Joseph is sort of like his reaction didn't quite match what was going on when what he saw. It would probably be less of a and more like a ah. But every time I try to attempt to voice that character, because I do voice Blue and Joseph, but we go back now. We see tears in Blue's eyes. We hear Joseph say, "Blue, Blue," that fades, and then we hear his mother. So this is a flashback, right? His eyes did not go. Let me see. His eyes did not go white. All right. He might have had a little white thing. His eyes did not go white. So this is a flashback. And so we see baby Blue, young Blue.
Right, right, Blue. We're okay. We're okay. Right, Blue. Blue. Blue.
Blue? Blue? Come on, baby.
Again. And so I think when I was developing the script, I was kind of like, how can I implement um sort of a story of why they have this gift, or like where it originated from, why Blue has this gift. And so I guess I came up with sort of something that doesn't really answer it, but sort of where it might have originated from. Like Blue isn't the only one that was passed down. And so basically it's just another one of those part of the lore where Blue's asking, can you tell me the story again? Because she's told him the story. And of course she made him, it's still somewhat demented to tell a kid like he was bleeding rainbows or leaking rainbows. But of course, you could assume that as a mother, she was trying to make it cute for him. and that's why he wants to continuously listen to the story instead of it being scary. And so, I used one of the voice actors, a talented voice actor. Her name is, I think she went by the name of Nova. And then I used another voice actor. I'm gonna put their names on the thing on my on the screen, and then put their little details. Um, as well as my other actors, I'm gonna put them down on there, even though they're in the credits of the film. I'm still putting them down in the bio. But you see that it goes back, and we see basically, um, we see Blue's mom as a little girl, and she's like, "When I was a little girl, I saw a man." Then you hear the little, and then he's like, "He leaked rainbows," because the child does what children do, and he basically stepped in and said, I got excited and said what he wanted to say. This is when you start to see her eyes be kind of light. You start to see that like big white circle in her pupils. And you'll see basically, I looked up some imagery because I was doing a little bit of research, and I looked up, imagery of what I thought was the devil, but turns out it was God, the Lamb of.
After his description of the four living creatures, next before John comes another strange beast. It is described as looking like a lamb, although it has 7 horns and 7 eyes, because of course it does. It also looks like it's been slain. Because of this, many associate this being with Jesus, who is sometimes called the Lamb of God. Whatever it is, the lamb creature holds in its hooves a large scroll with 7 wax seals. With this, the apocalypse is truly underway.
A whole thing that I was trying to, in this simplified animation, animate something that required a lot of imagery, a lot of detail, which was also a part of the challenge to sort of create something with simplified features and motions to try to illustrate a part of a story or use elements of um, a prophecy that has so much going on in it, imagery wise, visually wise. And so that's what I came up with. And then I used Google Translate, and I recorded it on my computer, added a little, details with that audio. And basically, it is along the lines of basically saying, "Listen, my child, the time is coming, it's coming soon." And she's basically looking back because she's scared. She's like, "Oh my God, it's happening again." She's like, rainbows, trying to change the subject, trying to move on. Not as comical as I looked doing it, but like trying to change the subject of what she's witnessing now because it's happening again. She's reliving this unwanted connection from God that she doesn't want. She doesn't want to see these visions. She doesn't want to have this prophecy. Um, which again, I would say is kind of controversial, again, with what I see a lot in just religions, a lot in spirituality, where a lot of people want to have, a spiritual connection. A lot of people they purposely, do shrooms, and they do all of the types of stuff, and they purposely go to like a boot camp out of nowhere, or they talk to this person, or they go to retreats, or they, in their Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, New Ageism, spirituality, all types of things. They all want to have a connection to something greater than them. And so I think that would be kind of controversial, not only in the Christian world, to sit there and say, well, why would I deny that, or why would that be an issue, but also just in general, because just to show maybe one of the reasons why she did get left behind, but also one of the things that maybe some people may feel when they do associate with religion. They may see a connection with God to be something that is harmful. Now, I would just want to reiterate that that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying, let me say this, that a connection with God is bad. I'm just saying, I'm just trying to articulate what that is and what that is representing. But I'm not saying that that is bad. I'm saying that there are certain things, certain feelings, me, that I wanted to put into the character, that I struggle with my own faith. I had issues with my own religion. I think I have recently, because of certain things, have been wanting to get back into my religion. But I hate saying that, due to the commentary on that I do on religion, due to the religious trauma that I do have myself. I think that a lot of people need to get away from getting into religion. That a lot of the things that I demonstrated with the characters of them having issues is because they worship religion rather than they worship God. And there's a lot of people that are overly intoxicated with religion. Like they are overly, if not, it's kind of connected to their ego. You know, they're very self indulgent into, I know so much about the Bible. You know, I get to tell people, I get to cast the first stone, even though I'm not saying that. And a lot of people, they are so caught up in the religion. They want to protect the tradition. They want to protect, which, you know, tradition does have its meaning, its purpose. You know, it's not all bad, but it's at the expense of actual connection. It's at the expense of actually feeling this thing we call God's love. And so that's something that I wanted to show within a lot of the characters, that they had love, they had family, but certain things deteriorated because people were overindulgent within their religion. They were overindulgent within division. And so it caused a lot of issues. And so when you see her talking about, you know, hello, is this thing on? So as she's talking, because this is the next day, I had to literally, I spent hours on the storage and stuff. But while she's sitting there talking to Blue, she's having a whole conversation with him. You see like flashbacks of her with her family. You see her with her mother outside. And then you also see like a hint of Blue having the gift, because you hear a noise and then you start to see that he sees something, you know, and it's kind of a,
Calm after a storm.
so as it goes back to her talking to Blue and we go into these flashbacks and other things that are happening in their past, she then says, you know, we all have this love inside us. A lot of the things that she was going back and forth with, um, not talking about her in the hospital holding her belly, crying. And this is because she discovered that her husband, Blue's father, died, basically. And so she's left by herself, going to family, doing other things, losing her faith, while she's pregnant with Blue. And so a lot of the conversation that she was having with him was her trying to figure out how to deal with this gift or this curse that she has, and also dealing with the death of her husband and a lot of issues that was going on with him. And so that's the reason why I kept going back and forth between different things. I was establishing the relationship that she had with Blue's father, and then I was also implying to other different things of where this spiritual gift originated from. And so the biggest part of why I added that also was to show the meaning of the title Bleeding Rainbows, because I wanted to show what that meant and what that was symbolic of, or maybe the symbolism of that title. And so it was very crucial for her to sit there and say,
Love. That is what we all have inside us.
kind of conflicting the themes of saying that, you know, us bleeding rainbows is something that's good, us having rainbows within us is something that's good, something that is positive. And then right when we leave, she's having a vision. Right when we leave her going into these flashbacks, and then she says love is inside of us, she has a vision, sitting on the bed, and then she leaves, and then you go back to her being a little girl, and you see that the man was actually her husband, which I know kind of confuses things. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with her having a prophecy or her being able to see the future in a way. Was it just going to be spiritual things? Was it also going to be personal things within her life? I guess I sort of did both. And the reason she sees who later becomes her husband, but not right now, it's just a vision. She sees him bleeding rainbows is because he was a part of the love that was in her life. He was significant in the love that was in her life, but also he was one of the reasons why she left the faith, and he was one of the reasons, his death was one of the reasons why she decided to leave believing in God and decided to resent God and decided to go into the darkness. And so that's the reason why you see him bleeding rainbows, but you also hear these sound effects in the background that's implying something demonic or something eerily bad. It's because I'm trying to show that two things are happening at once. And even though we do have love inside of us, there's still that horror element of things can still go wrong if we don't acknowledge the love we have for each other, if we decide to resort towards hate or resentment or pain that we have from certain situations in our life. And then, right when it goes from her as a little girl, it cuts to Jasmine. Say the timeline's kind of all over the place, and she's at college. And so basically, I had got permission to film on a campus that's near my home. It's literally I could walk to it right now. Got permission to film and people were barely there. And so a lot of these shots I just went around and just, shot whatever I wanted to see any dynamics. And I wanted to use a lot of isolation, especially on the night shots where one pivotal scene is where I was just playing around on my phone and then it changed the perspective of the camera and it made it look like everything was warped. And so it makes her look very small while she's outside of the door of the apartment with the orange light on her and like the dark background. And she's sort of looking around, looking for her keys. And then you hear in the background this like muffled voice and stuff. That is supposed to be a conversation with like demons and stuff. Basically, they're conversating, saying, "We're going to get you. We're going to take you." Basically, showing that they were already out for her and out for the family. And you can also infer that maybe with me trying to build the Lord, that maybe I'm just trying to represent that there has always been these spiritual things trying to come after people in this world. They just didn't see it because they were not connected to the spiritual. The spiritual was not seen. There was a disconnect. Things were in their place, and unless you go look for it, you're not going to see it. And so when I did these shots, I just wanted to also make sure that each shot had a different color of the rainbow. So one was like when you see her initially the first time, it's like red, and then you'll see the next frame or the next scenes, it's orange, and then you see the next one, it's yellow and green, and then you see the next one, it's blue, and then purple, and then um, green and orange, and then the final shot where you see her on campus and she is basically on the bridge and she's looking out. Uh, it's a rainbow. So not only um, a continuation of the story of the involvement of spirits and what does it mean to be a human in a world that you really don't know what's going on, or maybe you're not spiritually connected but the spirits are around you. What does that mean, or how would you create a scenario with that? It also showed a connection between Jasmine and Blue's mother, because they, even though are generation like years apart, obviously, because Blue's mother is obviously older than Jasmine, there's still a connection between, I would say, religious trauma that you see with Jasmine, even though she doesn't have the ability to see things, even though she doesn't have the ability to see beyond and have messages from God. She is still someone who grew up in a religious home, and her connection with Christianity is kind of flawed, is kind of damaged in a way. And so you see that later on in the short film where she talks to her father, and it seems like she's very defensive. While he's just sitting there saying certain stuff to her about how he, prayer works and all of this stuff. And I guess I was trying to illustrate not only the certain things that I had within my own life dealing with religion and the certain conversations that I had or certain ways that I felt, but also I feel like what we are now dealing with now in terms of there are a lot of people who seemingly hate religion, and it seems like a lot of people hate Christianity right now. And then it seems like a lot of people pity the other people who hate Christianity, and they just seem hateful and demonic. And then the other people say, "No, you're hateful and demonic." It seems like people are going at it with each other, especially the younger generation, seemingly with maybe the older generation in terms of the traditional Christianity versus maybe even progressive Christianity. So there's the old generation with the new generation. There's this debate. There's this disconnect. And so I just wanted to initially give that feeling or introduce Jasmine right away after Blue's mother when she was young, because I wanted to show that these characters are connected even though they're not related. Um then right after that, you'll see I took this when I went to, it was out in the country. One of my parents' friends, she was preaching that day at a church out in the country. Sweet people, beautiful church. It was a nice setting. And I decided to take a video in there because I saw this stained glass painting basically of Jesus. And I was like, okay, this looks interesting. I could use this for the film. And so I decided to use it. And I initially wanted to introduce that shot right after she says bye because, again, I'm just sort of interconnecting different things that are happening all at once to sort of remind the viewer what this is about, the themes of the short film, um, and also kind of give it a little another spectacle aspect or another mystery aspect of when only the subtitles come on and it says aliens came by, just sort of being like, oh, maybe it is aliens, maybe it's not, even though that wasn't the intention. I just kept it in there because I kind of liked how the pastor, when I went to the church, he was literally talking about the rapture, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is so. And so I got my phone out and I recorded, trying not to look crazy, and put it on my lap and recorded what he was saying, because it was basically something that was relevant towards what I was looking for, that was relevant towards what I was looking for in the short film, considering my short film is surrounded by the rapture, is talking about revelations. And so he was talking about, they're going to think aliens came by, they're going to think all of this stuff. And so I used that as part of the context for the film. And so then you see.
See you soon. Bye.
Kind of story, of course, aliens came by.
The Jasmine outside. This is outside, her parents' house. We've seen this before. Of course, it looks different. I also wanted to have one side lighter and the other side darker, because when we go back to that scene, she's going to be behind the trees, and then she's going to walk behind the trees. And I also wanted to utilize the trees as a part of the character space. That's why when you initially see her, she's walking in between the two trees that have the most space between them. She's walking and contemplating, talking to herself if she wants to go in. Of course, she eventually goes in and she decides to have a dinner with Joseph and her father. And then when they have an argument and she's like, I don't want to listen to you preach at me, she's then in between the two trees having a conversation, and then she goes behind that. And of course, it's intentional to have that side where she's between the two trees with the least amount of space between them, to also have the colors be a little bit more dull, just using the language of color, the language of film, to try to figure out a way to best illustrate something that maybe doesn't seem, I guess, approachable, or maybe you get it, but it always helps to add a little extra element to a certain scene. And then you get the close up of her knocking on the door. And then again, we go back to what's happening now. Okay. This is happening now. We're going back to what we established in the beginning of the film. And so that's basically where they're at now. After they got attacked, we went to the flashback. We get back to the present tense of what's going on now between Blue and Joseph. And it's basically showing that they're being vexed again, and this time the spirits are vexing Blue and Joseph. You see Joseph look at the shadow, and then you later go back. You later in the film see that the shadow was actually Blue checking on Joseph, but initially he's just sitting there looking, and basically you hear knocking, you hear spirits basically vexing Joseph as he's sitting there looking worryingly, you know. And so of course the dad, I like this scene. I didn't really know what I was going to do with the shading. A lot of the shading, a lot of the things is very literal, meaning that when I have the certain things that you'll see around Jasmine, like the white around Jasmine, then you have the gray markings around Joseph, then you have the black markings around the father of both of them. It's basically just another way of me trying to find a way to create some type of symbolism that seems a little bit redundant to sit there and say this over this over this in different ways. But I just came up with it on the spots because those little markings are actually spaces that the marker did not cover when I was erasing certain parts of the things that I was covering, and certain things were overlaying. And so that's what that was. I decided to come up with that as a way to sort of create this overemphasis of this is the position he's in. This is the position that she's in. This is the position that the father is in. And so, of course, I would put gray markings around Joseph because not only did I use the fact that he was just in the middle in general, but also um, the setup that's in the living room in the house. It had the one painting down, and then it had another painting up, and I was like, I could use that perfect as symbolism to what has happened to the family, the disconnect to the family. Things are not structured, things are not, put together neatly. There is a disconnect. And so that was very much important. The painting on the side of the father, holding up these values. And of course, that has, that I covered over the painting with the white marker. And then the one where the painting is down on the ground, I covered it with black marker to show that no longer is it just these values. No longer are we representing order, we're representing tradition. There are certain things that have happened, and maybe the side with the black marker is showing the side that Jasmine is on. She's no longer upholding these values where the father is still is. So, again, just finding ways to use the language of film. And I just decided to shoot. I had to figure out how I was going to do close ups. And Joseph is a year younger, well, more than a year younger, but the timeline is so different. I I had him sit there and acknowledge his mother at the church, to try to change the subject. But her not being there was important because I wanted to show how the father wasn't the only one who had the spiritual connection. Because if you see in the father's eyes, if you look closely, you'll see that his eyes will like glaze over a little bit, kind of showing that he's being vexed. You don't know what he's seeing, what messages he's getting. It could be that maybe she's not going to make it to the gates of heaven. Maybe Joseph's getting left behind, but he's really looking and looking kind of worried every time he gets like a glaze in his eye. And you see that maybe the reason he's trying to tell her about the faith is not only because that's just the way he is, that he's very passionate about his faith, but that's just a lot of who he is. It's also because he's talking about the faith because he's getting these messages from God. And even though it's unaware to the audience what these messages are, you can imply that maybe it has something to do with Jasmine not making it to heaven, or maybe something else is going on. And so while he's dealing with that, at least he's physically there with them. Usually, when we're talking about a dinner, usually if we're talking about the traditional sense, you'll have like the mother there, the father there. You'll have more family members there, making the dinner, especially if it's a holiday or like a special occasion or one of your babies is coming home. And so for the mother to still be at church and not be there with the family, but yet we have the father, we have Joseph, we have Jasmine, that implies that yes, the person is like in their faith and in their spirituality, but also that's troublesome to the fact that they're so consumed by it that what I was trying to show when we go back to that scene of me in the church and I pray we'll all be ready for his return. She also can see. And while we don't see much of Jasmine's mother, Joseph's mother. We do see her in the scenes later, but we don't really see her as an established character. That moment was to sort of illustrate a part of the problems with the disconnect, me showing that she is being spiritually involved at the expense of connecting with her family. And so that's trying to show a bit of dysfunction, even though I will call it, I wouldn't really say subliminal dysfunction of the family, but sort of like hidden dysfunction, something that's not really out there, but something that I was trying to illustrate when I was showing her in the church. Going to church lately? Speaking of church, have you been going to church lately? And she's basically like, no, I've been taking my medication. So, she has mental issues or some other health issue. And I've been reading my Bible. So she hasn't gone to church, but she has been, taking her medicine and reading her Bible. And, basically, Joseph's in the middle. He's looking like, what's going on, child? Not this again. And he's saying, well, I'm just saying, God can heal that anxiety. It's just the devil trying to. It's just the devil trying to. I then have, I decided to animate like this black wall come behind her. And then her eyes, you see her like face sort of morph from across. Kind of me trying my best to show, while using the horror elements, to show her religious trauma. There's a reason why she reacts the way she reacts to him. And there's a reason why she may seem defensive. There's a reason why she may not want to listen to him, even though what he's saying might be right. And what he's saying is true. She might not want to listen to it because of the certain stuff that she had to deal with during her childhood. You may not know what she's dealt with, but you could sort of see the certain things that probably she associates with maybe the church or maybe with her religion. So when she says not everything's the devil, we then go to Blue's father laying on the ground. Now again, what happened was he committed suicide. I did not show that. But that's what happened. That's part of the story. Um, and when you see that, basically, you can also probably acknowledge that because the families know each other later on in the film, you'll see that they know each other. That maybe she found out, and because she knows about Blue and Joseph, and they've been friends since they was little, she probably found out that there's some things that happened with Blue's father. That's the reason why when she says not everything's the devil, she's not only talking about her religious trauma, but she's also talking about how we shouldn't basically just tell people to pray it away when we have other things going on mentally, other things happening in the world. Some things just happen, and you should always be grateful for what you have. You should always be grateful for the life that you have. You should also be grateful for the things that you have. But also, I think there has always been this conversation about certain things happening and constantly why am I dealing with this? And then you also have in the background, while you see this, you'll hear
Was he supposed to pray it away? Was he?
that's basically again showing that she is questioning a lot of different things that are going on with her faith, a lot of different things that is happening, her viewpoints of God, and how basically if I was supposed to be anointed, if I was supposed to be filled with love, why is one of my loved ones dead? Why did you allow them to do this? Why didn't you heal them? Also, to show the dysfunction within the family, to show that she was calling her little brother instead of actually calling her father or calling her mother. That's also an element that I was trying to show of the dysfunction before trying to further that out, further kind of polish that so people will understand what I was trying to do. But when Joseph sits down and he says, wait, she's on the phone, she takes the phone, the father says, I still love you. He has like a heart eye just like her, so they're related. And basically, he's crying. Joseph's sitting there looking because kids always looking around like, what's going on? And this is very important. The music comes in. I made the music on BandLab, and you can see it because I use BandLab for everything because I'm not like a, excuse me, professional musician. And I just came up with that at 3 o'clock in the morning because I was just making music and I was restless like usual. And so I just made that symphony thing, and I decided that I was going to incorporate it within the film. Um, and so as the music comes in, it's called Little Light, and this is all contrasting with what is happening now. So this is back in the day. This is before the rapture. And so I'm showing what's happened, the symbolism and the issues happening now during the rapture, and then I'm contrasting this to what happened before. There were moments of happiness, there were moments of friendship, there were moments of love, there were moments of peace, and now this is the deconstruction of society. And so it's I guess I would say bittersweet, paired with the music. You see a lot of different things with family. Family is important, love is important, but faith is also important. And so you see the consequences of being left behind, and you also see the certain good moments that were happening before, and then again we take certain symbolism that I got from the Bible. I guess I could explain some of the symbolism of the scenes that are bad or showing bad things. One of the symbolism, I found out that giants, this is from what I saw in Revelations, that giants will roam the earth. And so when you see the man and he is sort of moving weirdly around that, I guess you could say it's like a sunset is going down and it's like a desert place. The movement of the character, nobody would ever guess. I used a scene from The Pianist, um and basically and he was running to get help like from one of the guards, and they basically were like blowing the building up, shooting everything. It was just horrible, horrible stuff. Based on a true story. And so I basically just used certain scene from that film, and I used it to try to animate the character at the bottom run across the landscape as like the devil hand comes and consumes. It creates an eclipse around the sun, and then it also casts a shadow on the screen. There was a lot of different elements that I was trying out in terms of animating, the deconstruction of society. And then when the shadow consumes the screen and goes into the sun, that's when you see that basically a giant is revealed, carried by his grandpa, and that he's out there and above the clouds like Superman. Just showing a fun moment between a child and his grandparent. I also think it's very important to show that with like black faces. A lot of my work always has like black people in it, not as a way to just as a protest, but just because I feel like it's good to normalize certain races that maybe aren't having certain things be presented with our people. Like I don't necessarily see a lot of animated films or a lot of different things where you see relationships with the grandparents, with the father, the mother, and it's with like black kids, or like black youth or black people. And it's a healthy, positive, loving way. There has been representation, but I just wanted to bring that in there. And so then the next scene you'll see this woman in hijab. I don't know what this was about. I kept thinking I need to sit there and have a woman in a hijab. I don't know why. I kept thinking why, and then I wanted to have her have green eyes. The reason she cries um black is because she's poisoned, she's sick. And her eyes are green, not only representing the greenery behind her, which is kind of a contradiction how the river is turning to like red, So I'm trying to illustrate that it's like blood in the river, bodies of blood is in the river. However, the trees around and the greenery is still growing. And so how, there's life still here, but it's being corrupted, basically, is what I was trying to illustrate. And so as she's sitting there, looking at the camera, I think it's one of the most powerful aspects of it, because I wanted to show her look at the audience to show the extent of what is happening within this world. And what I was trying to illustrate. You then see Blue and Joseph kiss, so it's like, whoa, controversial. Wah, wah, wah. Is that why they got left behind? Who knows? Yes, no, yes, okay. At the end of the day, I debated the relationship between Blue and Joseph and what I wanted to do. At first, I initially said they could just be brothers. I was like, yeah, let them be brothers. But then I was like, but then I would want to illustrate that in a different way. And so I didn't make them brothers. I decided to make them friends that got into a relationship. So naturally, that's going to be controversial, but the reason I decided to do it was not only because of the representation that it brings, but also because of what it says about people like Blue and Joseph, about queer people. It's not like they don't go unpunished, it's not like they got rewarded for the lifestyle that they lived. But I didn't want to make that seem like it was something that was demonic by default, or it was something that was just perverted or sexual. I didn't want to, I wanted an innocence behind it, coming of ageness behind it. But evidently, I did have to stick to what the Bible says about homosexuality, right? And it's always going to be controversial between the LGBTQ community and Christianity. So, of course, they did not get lifted up, but that was also another part of dealing with their humanity. And as a queer person, I always want to sit there and talk about certain stuff when it comes to queerness and when religion. It was very important to show that they did have love. They did have, anything anybody else, a straight couple had, but evidently they still had to deal with these hardships. They still had to go through that. It had both the two paintings up, then it had the whole families, both of the families talking to each other, the grandparents, the mothers, the fathers, the siblings. It had all of the family talking to each other, conversating with each other, and that was important to represent that being a good thing, that being something that exists, and how that's very important and it's very valuable to care about families, because life is fragile. Things happen and you want to really a lighter shade of blue for the sky, where on the outsides it has like a shade darker or something, if you really notice that detail. I kind of wanted it to be like as a triangle. I don't know. I was thinking about the Holy Trinity, and that's what came out. I was kind of like trying to represent something that, even with all of this crazy stuff happening, there's still life there, right? And there is still signs of holiness. There are still signs of God's creation being there, even though it's about to be destroyed, even though there are crazy things going on, and there's a new ruler in that society, in the society of the world, it is still something that is there's still aspects of life, there's still hope for something else. So I guess that's what I was trying to represent. And then we see the demon woman, we see a shadow go across the screen. We see the demon woman. She finally introduces herself. She's like, "Hello, hello, I need your help," And then we see a close up of Blue. They're now got like their faces are like bicycle seats. Their bodies are like skinny, and it kind of goes in. I wanted to show them be malnourished. Their hair is no longer there. And I wanted to show them not look like they've been through it, look like there was some type of effect that happened onto them, because the character design changes ever so often. The only reason that you're able to see that these are two different characters is because of certain differences in the nose, the mouth, the eye shapes, and the hair color. And so basically, a lot of the characters' designs have been established. And so you could probably figure out which character is which. We see a physical morph of the demon woman, and she's basically turning into a physical representation of the people that these characters love, the people that these characters are connected to. And then after she changes, each time she changes into Blue's mother, she changes into Joseph's sister. Um, you'll see basically you'll hear in the background what I added is like the demon basically whispering in the house or saying in the house like, "Oh, it's me, open the door, open the door."
Joe? Joe, oh my God, where have you been, Joey?
He's banging her head onto the door, showing her frustration, her anger, showing who she really is. She's cracking, she's slipping. She's not they're not budging, they're not doing what they need to do in order to align themselves with the cause, I guess you could say. And so of course a lot of that also was kind of crazy in this world. The different mechanics and the way things work sort of just happen. The blood appears and then it just disappears. It's like, well, that's just how it is. There's really no reasoning behind that besides it's just the way that I wanted to represent that. This is very important in the next scene after you hear her trying to reason and say, "Oh, I didn't mean it," and you see Blue at the corner and he's basically looking at the door. You'll see Blue's mother, she's naked in the back, and then it happens real quick as it zooms in. You'll also see three different people. They're naked, right? They all got like different shaped eyes. I just did that to do it. They have teeth. So again, I'm showing that these are not natural people. These are people who gave themselves away. There's no need for clothes. There's no need for anything. We are free. And then you'll see the 666 doodled under each eye. That's basically showing that they are part of the followers that she speaks of, part of the family that she speaks of, and that Blue's mother was about to be one. But then you see her fall down naked with her eyes going white. And so we never go back to that, but I was representing how there's certain stages that she's going through as one of the people that's seen visions, that she is dealing with that in the background. That's happening in the background. Comes and he's basically like, he's on his last leg. Blue says, "Go sit down." And this is the part of the film where it's like really sad, kind of bittersweet. And I think a lot of Christians wouldn't really like the way that the film, I know my dad didn't like it, the way the film ended, because obviously in the Bible, you are not supposed to commit. I could make a whole video of how I feel about that because I'm like, it's a controversial topic as is, but I wanted to find a way because I'm thinking not only in the mind of religion, but I'm also thinking of in the mind of a horror director. And so, as someone who works in horror, there's certain things where I'm like, oh, I could do that. Oh no, that's too much. No, I could do that. Oh, but what's the reasoning for that? Is that just for shock value? What's that? And so I came to the conclusion that they've been through so much that yes, they could have fallen. There could have been a whole battle, but I wanted to show that they did fight in a way, because if they didn't fight, they would have succumbed, or if they didn't, if they didn't try, if they weren't suffering, they probably would have been like those people outside, uh, excluding the Blue's mother, who took the mark of the beast and are just happily in their own body and are deformed. They would have been like that. And I thought about having that, like, it's kind of like revealed that one of the characters turns and takes the mark of the beast, and then the other character, like, there were so many different ways I could have ended that scene, but I decided that both of them commit fire. Oh my gosh. Yes, I know. It's crazy. So Joseph tells, Blue, I want to go home. Right. Said, how far do I want to take this? Right. And so I decided to have, when you see the blue blobs flow out of their mouth, that's their souls leaving their body. So basically, again, it was God having mercy on them. Again, I'm not saying that this is what will happen, just do this, or this is the conclusion that will happen. I really don't know. I know what will happen in the rapture, like everyone else, if you read the Bible, but I don't know all the things that will happen. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend like I do. But at the end of the day, that's what I wanted to conclude, the bittersweet ending to them. They gave their all, right? They went through hell and back, quite literally. And so at the end, they both made a decision to end their life. So I didn't want to make it seem like, oh my gosh, I didn't want to make it seem like it was something that was celebrating killing yourself, or celebrating that in a way that that's the only way to go. But it was sort of trying to emphasize why they did it, trying to have a way to say they did this because they were being tormented to death, quite literally. And so that's what I was trying to show. But again, people may be iffy on that, on the, I guess, the dynamics of that, the ethics of that, the morale of that, however you want to say it, however you want to articulate your opinion on it. That's what I came to. And so basically that was God giving them mercy, their souls lifted out so they didn't have to feel much. And then you'll see, the demon woman, she's sitting there and she's screaming, no, no, how could you? Now she's saying how could you to them. But she's also, I kind of want to say she's saying that to Blue, like, um how could you do this? How could you give yourself away? You could have been so valuable. How could you both do this? How could you do this? It makes it seem like the demon is, crying out like she's sympathetic, like, oh no, how could you? But that's not what I was trying to do. I was trying to show that she's basically, how could you give yourself away, and how could he take you from us? That's not the deal. That's not what, you can't do that. And so what I like is when we leave and the voice actor, she did amazing. Um, with the screen, we leave and then we see them laying on each other as hollow shells. And then what I wanted to show was a last bit of like rainbow esqueness coming from their hollow shells to show that in the end they left with love. In the end they left with love with each other. In my poetic era. So that's what I was trying to show. In the end, that's what was inside of them. It wasn't to sit there and say, they didn't have love for each other and they didn't have anything going on. They still died with love. Not even just love for each other, but love for their families. you know. Um, and so then it goes on, and then we go back. We go all the way back before everything, and we're at the park now. And then you hear Jasmine and Joseph, they're discussing, because apparently this is conversations that siblings have, LOL. And basically, he's like, Joseph's telling her like he's weird, he's acting strange. On one of the flashbacks when she was talking about that we all have rainbows inside of us, you see that little blue was looking, and then there was some sound in the background, and he was looking towards the camera, so it make it seem like maybe that's when he was starting to develop a sense. That's when he was starting to develop a certain type of thing that we, as the audience, may not, not as the audience, but as the other characters, may not have. Yeah. So, you see him lying on the table, and then here's a shot I took. It's just zoom in, and basically this is what he sees, and then it's like
No, that's cringy. That's cringy. No.
the whole short film of cutting to a black screen will finally at the end of the film cut to a screen that's white, and that was just showing that there was more to the story. Maybe I will continue the story, maybe I will try to crowdfund it depending on if it gets any more attention. But that was basically me showing a different way of ending it, that it did end on a light note. There is still hope. There was still some aspect of happiness. And then as they were sitting there talking about being on the lake, and Jasmine was telling Joseph that you guys hang around at the lake all the time. Now we see like these naked spirits. I didn't want to make the nakedness sexual. It's not sexual. But these spirits, they'd have no clothes on, and then the only ones with the face is Blue and Joseph, and basically all the people that we've been introduced to are um, in the lake, and it's like their own personal paradise. So that's the end of the film, and then you see the certain shots that I animated over and certain things that I did, and so and the people that were in that voiced the certain characters, and so that's basically the entirety of the film. Um, it was it took so long to do this film, and I was burnt out for a long time making a film like this by myself, and I'm about to make another film. I'm about to make a film using classical animation. So I got me a light board. Yes, in my classical animation era, even though that's literally the first animation I ever done. That's Bleeding Rainbows. I hope you guys check this video out and like it, me explaining it. I know I went through a lot. It's a lot going on. But that's what I wanted to show within the film, right? I wanted to show the different reasons or the different things that I did in this film. So, yeah.